So yesterday I made this clip, a reaction video to this video that was posted on the YouTube channel JTV, and the host was speaking about how this interview that he did several years ago with Rabbi Manis Friedman and here in Chabad Chassidus totally changed his perspective on God and religion. And I decided to go through his archives on his YouTube channel to, I think it's 3 years ago. He posted the interview, and I actually wanted to watch. This is actually the second interview he did after that initial video because the first one's very long. This is like a 12-minute clip. I wanted to watch it together and see how he sort of worked through the idea and how it changed his mind and how he was hearing actually some negativity to it and resistance when he started speaking about it with other people. So again, this is not the initial interview. This is the second one. So let's watch together and see what happens.
The last thing I'd like to talk to you about for our interview today is just going back to what you said in the first interview, which was such a big paradigm shift for me, which was that you said only a creator has needs. And it's so obvious to me now thinking about it, why would God create a world in which we see that whenever you create something, you have a need for it? Therefore, it would be intuitive. He would surely make it intuitive that we could intuit that he too has a need in creating us. But a question I wanted to ask was, is that true on the most fundamental, deepest level?
Uh-oh. He's getting sucked in. He's going down the rabbi hole. He's starting to think about it. Is this really true on the deepest level? Meaning, is this only true on a lower level, or is this really on the deepest level? This is where it's going to get interesting, people.
My question of it's fascinating to start thinking of God actually being the vulnerable one, and dependent on our sort of responding to him for him to become good and not just on his own. But is this just one sort of perspective of God, just as it's also a perspective that God doesn't have any needs? Or is this a fundamental thing? Because there's also some people I've been throwing this around with and discussing it with some other people, and they do fear that this is, it's potentially, it could be dangerous in it being too one-dimensional.
Could be dangerous. This is great. He's really pushing the envelope here. This is great.
And they say at the deepest level, we can't use any words to describe God. I think personally, the language you're using is the best way, I've found for myself at least, of relating to God and having a relationship with him. It doesn't make sense to me how you can have a loving relationship if neither of you complete one another. But I just wanted your thoughts on that, is it true at the deepest level we can't use any language whatsoever to describe God?
He wants to know if it's true on the deepest level, meaning in the essence, in Atzmos of God himself. Or is this only a certain level? He's been throwing it around. Obviously, you can see the way that he's talking that he's probably receiving some resistance. It's too one-dimensional. God is ultimately complete in and of himself. I'm sure people are telling him, maybe other rabbis perhaps. Now let's take a look how Rabbi Manis Friedman, YouTube's most popular rabbi, responds. I hope you're as curious as I am.
It's probably true that no matter what we say about God, it's not the whole story. That's probably true. Because there's more we don't know than what we do know. But what we do know is important. The highest thing we know about God is his need. That is the highest. The most primordial. The reason for it is very simple. God created the world out of nothing. Nothing. So there was nothing there besides him. And him decided to create the world. And there was nothing to motivate him. There was nothing, not even theory. So what are we left with? We're left with a God who just by himself, of himself, within himself, decided to create a world. It's not a need, it's his need, because that's all there was him. So whatever motivated God to create the world is essential to him, because there was nothing else to motivate him. So what is it about him that could possibly motivate a creation? His aloneness. It's so obvious, it's so logical and unavoidable. There was nothing else besides him. So what about him wants to create a world? You can't say kindness, love. Those things did not exist. There was just him. Love came later. Kindness came later. Royalty, being the king of the world, that came later. Even being a creator came later. The only thing that existed in the beginning is that he was the only thing. Now, if that's not acceptable, you have a motivation for creation. So what was not acceptable? His exclusivity.
So, to me, it's always been obvious if there was nothing but him in the beginning, Einod Mulvadai, and then he suddenly decides to create, where's that motivation coming from? Like the rabbi saying, obviously it had to be coming from him. There was nothing else to motivate him, nothing outside of him, which means it's internal, which makes it even that much more important, that much essential, because it's coming from him. Nothing influences him. Or like it says, like we always learned in Chassidus and in Yeshiva, that he was Yachid, he was exclusive, but he wants to be Echad. He wants to have complete oneness. So the motivation was, if you want to say it in simple English, just me, it's not enough. I want to have oneness. So it also states that the taiva, the desire for this oneness, is the taiva loy latzmuso. It's coming from his essence. Now, what the rabbi was saying in the beginning of the clip, like there's so much more that we can't know, meaning we can never, as human beings, fully grasp what that means, because we're obviously thinking in human terms. So as much as we can sort of relate it in this conversation, it's really much more infinite, much more essential that we can ever imagine. That's the part that we cannot know, but that the part that it is, and it's coming from his essence, and this is the deepest part of him, that's what we know. But the magnitude of that, being that we're limited, finite creations, it's hard to tap into that, but luckily we have a soul, a godly soul that can tap into it. But let's continue.
So it wasn't in some way that he was feeling in any way needy in a sense that would diminish his self-sustain. In other words, would he be able to be just fine without us? So he's not good without us.
He was already eternal. So he couldn't get older, he couldn't get bigger, he couldn't get stronger, he couldn't get smarter. The only thing he could get was smaller, to not be the only one. God's humility, or vulnerability.
I have to tell you, when I discuss your interview with someone,
to someone that actually teaches me. They said, hold on, if what you're saying is true, and by the way, we know it's true that whoever wants the relationship more is the one that's more vulnerable. But when I was asking these questions to him, what does it mean to serve God? This idea that God needs us. He said, hold on, but that would then bring God down to my level. I thought, yep.
Thus making him lovable.
Okay. This is where some people could get confused. The fact that God can't get older, stronger, and weaker, those were all descriptions of him and things about him. But that's not what's most important to him. It's like, why would somebody get married? A bachelor, he has his own house, he has his own car, he has his own money. Where is the need to get married coming from? What does he need? So it's not what he needs, it's who he needs, and therefore he gets married. So it's the same thing. God is almighty, powerful, wise, strong, whatever it is, but that's not the essence of him. It's who he's after. He was Yachid, he was one alone, but he doesn't want to be exclusive. He wants someone. So that's really the distinction that they're trying to make here. So in order to execute that process and begin it, he had to contract himself. He had to hide himself in order to allow us to have the free will to really have that oneness, or else he's still alone. And therefore, like we quoted in our previous videos, the Gemara says, in the place that you find his greatness, you find his humility.
But the point is, he did contract himself, and therefore, is it not in some way fake? And that's the point, that we can't ultimately know him because he doesn't. Like we said, he's done this in some way for us, I don't know, for him. It gets into tricky territory.
Yeah, it's a good question. Parents who say to their children, you decide, you're old enough, make your own decisions. Is that fake? Are they really sincere about that?
Yes.
Hopefully. Wouldn't they rather control their children's lives? Come on.
Hope not.
There is a danger there. In human beings, there is the danger that as much as they say they want you to be independent, they only want you to be independent the way they want you to be independent. You can marry anyone you want except that one. So they're still controlling, right? Now, when God gives us independence, it's real. And he suffers from it. It's real.
But at the highest level, you're saying the greatest thing we know about God is that there is a need for our existence. Will that always be the highest thing we know? And is there something above that, even that we don't know?
If we don't know, then we can't talk about it.
Yes, but isn't that what Ein Sof is? The concept of Ein Sof, and in some respect, we just don't know him.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that God is a blank. Don't turn him into a nothingness. There is more to know. Someday we will know. But don't turn him into the ultimate mystery. That's not the God of Israel.
But will there always be more to know? In a good sense. Right.
But there'll always be more to his need, because that's infinite. So he needs us infinitely. So we will continue to find more and more depth to that need. We thought we knew what need meant. Oh, we're going to find out what it really means.
Something I actually...
very important point. So it's not like on a certain level he needs, on a high level he don't know. It doesn't need. In the deepest level, he needs. That's never going to change because it wasn't created. It's part of his essence. It's who he is. And like the revelation of Kabbalah and Chassidus, it just keeps on upping the ante and saying, wow, you thought this is like the type of need. It's much deeper and much more personal than you've ever thought. But not like when you go to a deeper part, because we don't know. And therefore what he's saying is don't turn God into ultimate mystery. You meet many, even very religious Jews, and say, well, we can't know God in his essence. And like Rabbi Friedman's saying, is like, then God becomes the ultimate blank. Like the higher up you go, God just turns into this black abyss, and ultimately there's nothing, and we can never know. What? We can never know. We don't know that he wants us to do Torah and mitzvahs and all that stuff. Of course we do. That is for sure, and that is truth, and that never changed and didn't come into creation. Torah and mitzvahs are not part of creation, they're part of creator. But I guess the personal side of it and the urgency of it and how real it is, that we can explore. And that's what I think it says about Mashiach. Torah chadash miti teitze. Mashiach is going to reveal how it's even much more personal and how much more necessary and urgent it is than we've ever thought.
Thought of recently was that, isn't it interesting how at the beginning of Jewish history we become slaves, where we are completely subject to and dominated by the Egyptian empire, and we completely subject ourselves. And at the end of history, and that's how we start, as a people that know how to serve. But in some ways, as you said earlier, are babies. And at the end of history, we're people we're not interested in any authority, but we're also the most needy generation of all. And what I feel will happen when the Messiah comes, the Messianic era, I don't really like to talk about the Messiah, it's like in the perfect world, is that I think what will happen is all the neediness that we felt, all that sensitivity that we have been feeling for ourselves, it's like it will help us to throw that back to God and do it not out of a, you're my master, but out of a, you're my spouse almost. And it'll be incredible.
Yes. Exactly right. The healthiest form of vulnerability. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. It really is. And Rabbi, thank you so much for your time, for your insight, your original and unique insight. Although perhaps you might contest the word original. But it's certainly new to me, at least, some of the things you've been saying. I really appreciate your time, and I hope we can continue to have many more conversations, which I know I and so many of our viewers are gaining so much from.
Let's do it again.
Great. Thank you.